Hey everyone, welcome to this video. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the audio and video quality right now because we are actually closing on a house tomorrow and all my studio stuff is packed up. And I say studio stuff, it's super fancy, but just my general lighting setup is not here right now. So many of you asked about a tutorial for this piece. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through the process from start to finish, but I'll put a timestamp for anyone who wants to just skip ahead to the After Effects section. Yeah, so with that, let's get started. So these are the first three sketches that I did for the idea that I wanted to get out. And the purpose of these is just to try to explore the options and kind of get what you have in your head out on paper and really nail down what you want to do compositionally. I like doing these in black and white because you can really see where the focus will be, and it'll really help with just mapping out what you're going to do later on in the piece. And I highly suggest that you don't skip this part of the process because you figure out a lot of problems and you can fix them way earlier in the process rather than trying to figure out everything once you have all the color down and have a bunch of layers to work with. So yeah, keep it to like 1 or 2 or 3 layers at the max and just try to figure out what the overall feel of the piece is gonna be compositionally at the beginning. So next I moved on to color comps and I just took the sketch that I chose and moved it or copied it 3 times and then added a layer on top of it, and that was an overlay layer, and you can just paint over top of it with color, and that is a really fast way to just get a general feel for the piece color wise, and then later you can move that over into the final composition and then use a color picker and get a general color palette, which saves a lot of time and headache with trying to make decisions color wise, because you understand what the piece is going to look like as a whole from the get-go. So that's very nice. And then towards the end you will probably see me use color dodge. So color dodge is another layer on top of the overlay layer that I just use the soft brush and go over it just to bring out the vibrancy of the lighting. So yeah, now let's move on to the final composition. So with all that work behind us, now we have a good solid stage to set up for the final comp. And the first thing that I want to do is start blocking out these different shapes and layers at the beginning. So I'm keeping each of the different values is a different layer. So the foreground is the darkest, then the midground is the next darkest, and then so on all the way back into the light. And with that, you're able to turn on the alpha lock, which is an option for your in your layers panel. So you click on the layer that you want to alpha lock, and then a whole slew of menu options comes up and you can click alpha lock, and that allows you to just paint on the pixels of that layer. So that's a great way to start blocking in shapes within shapes. So we've got the mountain set up in the background, and right now I'm just trying to work on the lighting and texture and all that stuff. So for the brushes, I'll put a link in the description, but I used Jingsketch, and that's an artist. I think it's over on Gumroad or something like that. And then another one is Wes Gardner's brush packs. The first one's free, and the other one's like $2. But and I used a couple different brushes in those, but I'll put that all in the description below. Yeah, so I'm really trying to figure out the shapes of the rocks and trying to keep it to like 1 or 2 colors at first, and then color picking and just using a little bit of variation with the hue and color and and just trying to really accentuate the forms. And a tip for environments is to keep the shapes simpler in the background, broader, and because usually your eye wants to go to the most contrasty thing. So in the background, keep it a little bit simpler, use less harsh values, and yeah. So for the majority of this, I do have alpha lock on, so you just paint shapes in the shapes and really carve out the form of all of the different layers. With alpha lock on, you can erase, I think, but you can't paint outside of whatever pixels are on the layer. So if you want to start getting outside of those shapes on a specific layer, you're gonna have to turn alpha lock off, which I did with the leaves because I ended up using a brush called Aurora, which is a native brush to Procreate, and I find it really fun for leaves because it automatically shifts the hue a bunch while you're painting, and I think maybe the saturation a little bit, so you get a lot of variety in a single paint stroke, especially for leaves. It's fun. And so yeah, these layers are all separate with the hopes of moving them back and forth in After Effects when I bring them into After Effects. So it's really important to keep your layers organized. And for this specifically, and I think I'll cut to maybe a screen recording of how I have my layers set up so you guys can see that. But I have groups and layers within those groups so that I can go into After Effects and move individual layers, but also keep them all together so that whenever I have one of them moving, they all kind of stick together. So there's layers that all stick together while they're moving. They're on the same 3D plane. So now I'm working on the leaves of the trees, and really just keep kind of carving at the lighting, and I threw a color dodge layer over it just to kind of brighten my spirits a little bit, say like, okay, this is gonna work out. I know it's gonna work out. And for this, I like painting really harsh lighting so that I can just really see the contrast at first, and then I'll pull back and go through like the blending modes and just see what looks best. And you'll also see me like flicking back and forth between the original color comp and what's going on right now, because you don't want to lose the original intent of the piece. And if you start straying too far from that, you can always look back at your original color comp, because like I said at the beginning, you really know the feel that you're going for, and if you want to stick with that, especially if you're doing client work and you send them a sketch, they're expecting it to look pretty similar in the end. So I had a little bit of trouble with these trees in the background. It was really funny. It's funny going through this piece because I remember exactly what I was thinking at all these specific times about how it was trickier than I thought to lay out those trees on the back mountains, because every tree was a decision compositionally, because it was a little too generic, I think, in the color comp to figure out where the trees were going to go, but I had to really solidify where they were going to go in this piece. So yeah, we're starting to work on the foreground a little bit. The foreground is the scariest part because it has the most detail, and you have to really figure out, you can't like suggest things as much, you really have to commit to what is up front, because that is the closest thing to the viewer, and they are going to know if that actually looks like grass or if it's just a paint squish. I felt like it was too empty on the grass section, so I added some rocks, and I thought that filled out things nicely. It added to, I think naturally, when you're at the base of a mountain, it doesn't just go straight from grass to the rock of the mountain. There's rocks and grass intertwining throughout the whole thing and gradually shifts up. So that was that decision. Making sure the background is pushed far enough back, and then this is the stage when I started adding some mist, and really mist is kind of a cheap way to push distance in your painting, and it's fun to give it the atmospheric perspective is what they call it. Yeah, but it really helps with drawing your eye to where you want it to go and pushing the background back further and the foreground further up. So we're nearing the end of the painting process. These last few layers are color dodge again. I just wanted to add some lights coming in from the side, some sunshine spewing over the mountain into the piece. So, all right, I think that's it for the painting section. So if you guys have any further questions, please leave a comment below. Hopefully I covered what you guys wanted to know, and if not, just ask. So we are going to move on to the After Effects section now. Alright, so we've got our After Effects project here, and then up here in the corner we have our Photoshop file that was exported from Procreate, and you can bring it into After Effects, and this is how it'll show up. So you'll have layers right here. So these are all the individual layers that are in the Photoshop file that you exported, and then this is like all of it together. So it's all the layers here, and then yeah, so and the way it works when you bring it in, if you group layers in Procreate, they'll show up like this in another composition. So if I click on this one, it'll be the foreground. So these are the trees that are in the foreground, but it's made up of two different layers because I have a little bit of mist or fog at the forefront, and then this tree layer. So they're kind of grouped up like that. And then here's the other one, the secondary one. So this is the one that I've already done, so all the motion and keyframes are already done. But I'll show you how to do that. So yeah, so I brought it in, and I thought the easiest way to do it, because there's a couple different ways to get this done. So you can scale things up accordingly to where it looks like it gives the illusion that you're zooming in, or you can, in After Effects, do this in a 3D layer way, which is what I prefer, kind of, because it looks a little bit more authentic. And the way to think about it is, or the way I think about it is, say you have like a table, and you have like three pieces of paper, and you're standing them vertically upright. And so they're facing towards you and they're standing upright, and you pull the first one towards you, keeping it flat towards you. Then the second one you pull a little bit further towards you, and then the last one you just leave in place. So they're spaced out. There's one close to you, one a little bit further away, and then one where you first started. And that's exactly what we're doing in After Effects, so that when we push a camera in or we move the pieces of paper out, it looks like we're moving towards whatever is staying still. So it, in a sense, is giving an illusion still, but we're actually working in 3D space. So I hope that makes sense, and if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. Okay, so we'll dive into the 3D part of it. So what I have here is, let's start with the foreground. And we'll do the movement first, and then I'll go into all the little nuances and effects. So we've got the foreground here, and this is the 3D layer tick box right here. So right now this is not in 3D space, and if I turned it on, that would be in 3D space. And you see what happens over here in the window, in the viewport. Right now it's only in 2D space, but then when I tick this, you've got your 3D space right here. So you've got your x-axis, your y, and your z. Yeah, so that's what 3D space does in After Effects when you turn this on. And even within this, there are a couple of different ways to do it. I chose to, instead of putting a camera in, which I'll show you what that looks like, and I'm holding my phone right now to record the audio, so normally I would hit the hotkeys for this, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to open a new camera, and what you should be getting here is a camera, and you can mess with the orientation of the camera, the position. So right now this is where it is in Z space, and you can push it in like so or pull it out. And I just thought about the fact that it's all flat at the beginning. So yeah, so we're gonna go towards the end of this little sequence here. And so now when I push in and out, you can really see a little bit more depth going on. That's because everything's a little bit spread further out. It's like the pieces of paper are actually pulled towards you and pushed back. But the reason I didn't do the camera thing was because I wanted a little bit more control of where the individual layers were going to move. I wanted you to be able to see all the composition still as we were going, so I was able to raise the layers, because otherwise it's like you can see see the little like bottom of the house where I didn't paint anything else. It's just kind of floating there. That was like some of the problems that I was running into whenever I started using the camera. So I opted out of the camera and just moved the layers instead. So in here we've got 2 keyframes. It's super simple animation. So we've got right here the position set at 0, and I think all of them are set at 0 right now. For, like, we'll open the midground. Yeah, all of them are set to 0 for the z-axis. So in space, they're all like a flat stack of paper. But as the timeline moves on, you see that their values increase. So at the very end, like this one will end up at like negative 100 in the z-space. And this one is at negative 750. So the foreground moves way closer to you than the middle ground does. And that's what gives the illusion of it being pushed forward. So I think I also moved some of the y-axis, so up and down. I moved that a little bit just to cover where the little cabin is underneath. And yeah, so that's the basics of movement. So if you keep your layers all organized like this, like a foreground, second foreground, midground, and then I've got the backgrounds, it's just kind of a simple way of doing things. But and then within those layers, if you this is what I kind of want to explore next, but you can like animate individual things like layers within your groups, like in Procreate if you wanted to. And then so like if you wanted to turn his head, if I wanted to turn his head or something, we could do that while it was moving in and he would move his head. So that would be really cool. Anyway, so, and sorry if this is really long-winded. I just want to make sure I cover everything for you guys. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to cover everything that I can think of. Okay, so then we've got my signature. We've got the color dodge layer, which was this little top glow, and then also right here in the midsection to kind of bring the brightness out in that. And I think there is one of these is, yeah, okay, this is the one I want to talk about. So this is the light beams coming from the side. And what I did here was really simple as well. So there's an effect, Venetian blinds. So what it does is, if you watch over here, when I move this slider, it basically transforms. It's like a transition. It's like you have blinds in your home, so that's what it's doing. It's just opening and closing the blinds. So what I had done was just did a 40% transition, which felt right to me. And then there is a way also to do, they are called expressions in After Effects. And it's basically a little mathematical equation that you can, listen, I'm not that smart, especially with math, but you can Google effects or expressions like this one, wiggle. There are a lot of simple ones, but basically it's saying like you're gonna wiggle this little slider mathematically, like the program is, so you don't have to do it manually and go in and set all the keyframes. So it's like it's gonna do it 5 times a second, and it will go a variance of 10% either way, like that. So yeah, and I don't know all the intricacies of the expressions and stuff, but that's a common one I use, and it's applicable to like everything. So if you wanted there to be more motion in your individual layers, you can set the wiggle to say your scale or your precision, so it would just like wiggle a little bit more. Yeah, anyway, when done subtly, it does wonders for sure. So that's how I got the little glistening effect up in the corner there and back here. And then with the mist, I think the foreground 2, is that the one? Yeah. So the mist, I think all I did was just move it. I just set a position. Yeah, they're keyframes, and I just moved it down like that. I think I ended up having to scale out a little bit so that I had room to move the fog, but I thought it was fine. I really didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on the animation. There's a lot more you could do with it, but for the purpose of my goal, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, but that's what I did for all the fog in there. And then I think the last thing is just the leaves, right? The leaves falling are just shape layers, and I think I just animated them. So I moved the position and the rotation, and yeah. There's a thing called parenting also. So when you hold this and drag it to a certain layer, it will follow this layer wherever it goes, like a child to a parent. If you have a well-behaved child, that is. Yeah, so when this layer moves forward, so does this one. That's why it's super subtle, but when I zoom in, you can see the leaf slightly moving with the layer above it. But all those subtleties, I think, make for a nice animation. So I think that about covers it. Again, if you have any more questions, let me know. it's a super fun way to give your animations a little bit of life and excitement. So I hope this really helped. And if you guys did learn something and implemented it into your next piece, I would love to be tagged in whatever you create. Thanks so much for your support, and yeah, we'll see you next time.